I think it's safe to say that Half Life Alyx is still considered one of the best VR games of all time. When you look around at more recent comments from players who get into the game well after its 2020 release, it's sometimes met with a bit of negativity, mostly due to being not quite as life-changing as most of the VR community make it out to be. And to be clear, I'm one of those people who played Half Life Alyx back in the day when it first released and felt it was a truly incredible VR experience and one that is rarely bettered even by today's top games. But it occurred to me recently that maybe I'm remembering it better than it actually was.
Alex, up here! You're gonna need a gun! Don't worry, it's unloaded. It's unloaded now!
And the new players are actually onto something, saying the game is good, but not the most amazing game ever. As an example of this, I still remember the first time I saw a replay of Gran Turismo on the original PlayStation, and I thought it was the most realistic car game I had ever seen. But when I look at the game today, I find that memory pretty hard or even impossible to believe, but it definitely happened, and more importantly, I remember how it felt. And in terms of Half Life Alyx, there was plenty of those amazing and memorable moments when I first experienced it back in 2020. Like, for example, the very first time you jump into the game and you're standing on the balcony overlooking the Citadel. This city literally looks alive, and I remember thinking it was the most detailed thing I'd ever seen in VR and well up there with anything that any next-gen console could produce. Then there was writing on the window with the pen. I mean, it's stupid, but it felt amazing. Then there's feeding the little grub thing in the jar, being tasered in the lift, putting on the gravity gloves, and actually using them for the first time. I mean, I could go on, there's so many of these, but even the weapons stay in my mind too. Once you upgrade the pistol, you have to reload it twice, and I remember thinking this was absolutely fantastic, not only to visually feel and see, but even the sound of this happening.
I think that's the last of them.
Good, because we don't have much time.
It just never got boring to use, and that's the same for slamming shells into the shotgun and flicking it back to reload it. Now, I'm not sure whether it was because no other game had done this at the time, but I still remember the feeling of experiencing these particular mechanics for the first time. Now, interestingly, through attending gaming events and even hosting public demos for different companies, Half Life Alyx also carries the title of the game that kind of ruined VR for many people. And not because it was bad, because it was just too good, and everything else, the people who invested in a Valve Index and Half Life Alyx, they just struggled to find any game that gave them the same amazing experience. So for today's video, I wanted to review Half Life Alyx for the very first time and figure out, after playing games like Horizon Call of the Mountain, Batman Arkham Shadow, Metro Awakening, and all the incredible Resident Evil games, and obviously there's just so many others I've reviewed over the last 4 years, is Half Life Alyx still to be considered one of the best VR games virtual reality has to offer. Now, to keep everything in perspective, the budget for Half Life Alyx is said to have been anywhere between $29 million and $75 million to develop. And another thing that occurred to me that makes this very different from revisiting a game on a flat screen from a game's console is that VR hardware has vastly improved from the last time I played it. Things like resolution, haptics, weight of hardware, and lenses all make a difference. When I first played Half Life Alyx, I had a 2080 Ti and used an Oculus Rift S, which after recently using the headset again has awful screen door. I'm now using a 3080 Ti Quest 3 at 120Hz, and I have to say the game looks absolutely jaw-dropping all over again. Almost everything in the environments is interactable and all the objects have weight. The game does feel more linear than I remember it, but there's plenty of diverging paths if you want to take the time to look around and explore. And nearly every time you do choose to explore, it's rewarded with ammo or more resin to upgrade your weapons. Re-experiencing the memorable moments that I mentioned earlier that were absolutely breathtaking back in 2020 actually felt that way all over again. And what really stood out to me this time was the character animations of, say, Russell, for example, who actually keeps the story from being quite mediocre. The story's okay, but Russell is the character that keeps this game alive.
Now, pretty soon they're going to realise that your dad is not going to talk, and when that happens, he's off to have his brain sucked out.
Russell.
Potentially. Maybe not, though. I mean, they could just drill into his... Oh, yeah, still your dad.
The music was absolutely on point, and random world items just all having physics. Even things like cushions that have no relevance to in the game have physics. And overall, the sound effects of everything was just excellent. As I said earlier, for this playthrough, I really took my time, so I could just take in all the details and check everywhere for resin. And I found myself completely hooked all over again. The weapons looked absolutely gorgeous, and the attention to detail was truly amazing. And even on the highest settings, this game just wasn't really taxing my system in comparison to the visual visuals I was seeing in the headset. I also enjoyed the mini-games used to, say, disarm the trip mines, or when you have to open the weapon upgrade box. There was also one moment I completely forgot about when going back into this, and that was the encounter with Jeff. And even though I remembered how to deal with him pretty quickly, it's still a fantastic part of the game that fills you with anxiety, because if any of those glass bottles hit the ground, it could mean game over pretty quickly. There's also a surprising amount of enemy types. There's 3 types of head crab, with the spiky shell ones being the biggest pain. There's also the revivers, which are called lightning dogs, and if you don't deal with them quickly, they reanimate any corpses in the area. The combine are pretty varied too, with 2 larger types who each pose a slight threat unless you can get in close. Each one of these enemies has a different way of attacking you, and also your approach to deal with them varies. Now I want to be clear, there are some games that actually look visually close to Half-Life Alyx, but I would argue they are nowhere near as optimised as this one. There is a couple of things that did stand out to me though that were not as good as I remember, and that's the combat. The Combine AI isn't really much of a challenge at all, and they either take a ridiculous amount of headshots with a pistol or just a one-up close headshot with a shotgun. And the exploding dying animations were pretty janky too. They don't really fly around if there's an explosion, they sort of seem stuck to the ground and just sort of flip up in the air. My hands sometimes clip through the environment, and the movement system is probably the thing that feels the oldest out of everything. You can't run, which feels a little bit frustrating, and back in the day, teleportation in VR was a standard. Most games even launched without smooth locomotion or smooth turning, for example. But Half-Life Alyx uses the teleportation system also as a jump button. You simply hold down the joystick and teleport everywhere to get under and over everything, and you can also use it in combat as kind of an OP cheat, because it's an infinite move. Looking back on it now, maybe a cooldown timer would have been a good idea to stop me wanting to spam it, and I did stop using it to enjoy the game, but still, what I really wanted to do was parkour some of these sections, run and jump over gaps and walls instead of teleporting. You also don't have a body, which I don't remember caring about the first time, but I'm starting to wonder if Half-Life Alyx was the game that gave birth to the VR mechanics we take for granted today. The gravity gloves, for example, enable you to pull items towards you and have almost an infinite proximity for use, but many VR games now use this idea as a mechanic with no explanation as to why it actually works, and we don't question why we have this special ability in terms of immersion breaking. In a lot of VR games, you just point your hand, pull the grip button and gesture, pull in a magazine or a weapon towards you, and you think nothing of it now. And personally, I actually like it. It obviously stops me having to bend over all the time when I love to stand playing my VR games, but I can't remember experiencing this mechanic before Half-Life Alyx. The next thing is wrist storage. Now I've seen this in many games since, but I do wonder if Half-Life Alyx was used by developers as some sort of benchmark going forward. So it led me to wonder, for developers, was there a before Half-Life Alyx and an after Half-Life Alyx in terms of game development? The game is actually a lot shorter than I remember too, and it clocks in around 6.5 hours, but as I mentioned earlier, there is just so many memorable moments in this game. It looks absolutely stunning, and I've got a feeling that some of you who haven't got a PC and haven't been able to experience Half-Life Alyx might not have to wait much longer, because one of the things I hope that happens if Valve launches the new Decade headset is that we get a standalone version of Half-Life Alyx, and I know that's a long shot. I believe that Valve can do it, and I would love to play this game all over again. So in terms of a review, overall, it's absolutely mind-blowing, and it definitely gets a buy recommendation from me, and I would still consider it one of the best games that virtual reality has to offer. Thank you ever so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.